Okay, so we're recording. So here's what and I need to share my screen. So let me share my screen. Here's what we had talked about doing, is creating a number of children variable, and I've done it and tested it, but I want you guys to do it. I looked at the feedback from the meeting last week, so I'm trying to do this. And Yvonne's not here, so you guys can we can walk through what that is, and then some of this we won't be able to do, but some of it we will. And so I think we're ready, and I would like to hear kind of how you guys want to go about it. So the first thing that we have to do is create the number children variable. And so the very first thing that I would do is run the frequency. Sorry, and it doesn't always show up on the right screen. So one of the questions that we have is how many children under 18 live with you? And this is what we have, right? So we have 10, which is the brother. And then we've got 1 through 5. And we had talked in class about making 1 and 2 children a group, and then making 3, 4, and 5 a group. So do you guys remember how to create variables in SPSS?
Not off the top of my head. No, I don't remember.
So it's called compute, and it's a transform. You would go under, and this is menu driven, which I actually don't do, but I'll start you there anyway. I learned where you wrote code, so I always write my own. And so you would create the name of the variable, and so I have my own, so we can compare to see how well what you guys do versus what how it works. We can see how close it is. So what do you want to call it?
I'm sorry, so this is the number of kids
under 18 in the family. Yeah, and we want 2 groups. We want the 1 and 2, and we want the 3 and more.
I guess just like, can we do it like 1 to 2 kids and then 3 plus kids?
Well, we need the name of a variable. So we'll have different groups, but this is just the overall variable. We can call it family size. I called it number of children, but...
Yeah, number of children I think is good. I like that better than family size.
So there's no spaces, right, in SPSS. It gets really mad if you give a space. Okay. So then what you do is you bring over the variable that you want it to be. And so we've got how many children, right, are in the family. Mm-hmm. So, and then this is where having run the frequency before becomes really important so that you know what your options are. And so if this is equal to, well, can I show you how I do it? Let me show you how to do it in code, because that'd be easier for me, because I would just paste this. So I always believe that you should have code. And the reason that I say that is because and I'm not going to show you guys how I did it. The reason that I say to have code is because in 6 months you'll come back and people will say, well, how did you decide these groupings? And you won't remember if you just do it in the little cut and click and paste. So it's always better to have code. And so it is called compute. And then we called it number of children. And then we always set it to 0 to start. Oops. I have a Band-Aid on my hand, so we'll see how well this actually works as I type. So you always set it to 0, so that when 0 comes up later, you can kind of see what you have. And then you have to actually know the name of the variable. So it's if, and then this, it happened to be Q0007.
Why did you put it next to 107?
Oh, just because above I actually have what I did, and I don't want you to look at it.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if that was like on purpose for any reason. Okay.
No, it's mostly me just moving it up the space. So if Q0007, so what are the values that we saw that it could be?
1 and 2.
Okay, so if it equals 1, then you don't type a then, but it is an if-then statement, children. equals 1. And I'm going to really quickly run this because there's something that I learned when I ran it. So you set it to 0. So then everything else, if it doesn't equal this, everything else should be 0.
Mhm.
But when we saw the printout, it gave us numbers, right? Let's see if I can find that printout again. So here were our options, right? It was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and part-time 4. So when we go to run this, we should get an error code. Yeah, we did. So here's our error. It's saying we treated this like a number, but it's a string. Because someone typed in part-time 4, it came over as a string variable instead, which we could have checked beforehand. I didn't the first time. So then what you need to do when you do is you put it in one quote, and then that tells it that it's a string. And because this is not in the quote, it will turn it into a number.
Okay.
And the way that you know if it works is you go and you highlight it and you run it again, and the bad stuff goes away at the bottom. So we've got 1 equals 1, which is going to become a category. So then what do we do with 2? So how many categories do we want at the end of this?
2.
2. So if the value is 2, is that in the same category as 1, or is it a different one?
The same category.
So we leave this as equal to 1.
Okay.
So then if we do 3, what happens here? Do we want to keep that as 1, or do we want to do a new category?
A new category, right?
Yeah. So we knew we had 3. We knew we had 4. And we knew we had 5.
And we decided not to use that other value, right? The part-time.
Right. So that was the other thing. If we wanted to, we could put that in part-time, and we would put in, we have to have, this is where having the rundown is, you have to put in it exactly as it is. So you would, if we wanted to use it, we would have to make sure it's lowercase space with a number. But we decided not to use it. And so we'll leave it as a 0 for this case. And then we just made up groups, and so we won't remember the names of the groups later. So there's 2 other things that you do. There's variable labels, which is if we wanted to, we could say number of children, and we could say this is a number of children in the family or whatever. But we definitely need value labels, and that's to tell us what the 1, the 2, and the 2 mean. Okay, so we have to value label, so you have to write down the name of your, the name of your variable, right? So it knows which one, and then you'll put down your value. So 0 is going to be the person who wrote 0, the people who wrote part-time, and if something's truly missing. So what do you want that to come up as? Does that make sense? Like when we run it, it'll give it a name.
So this is for the ones that are, you said people who wrote 0. And
Yeah, we have one person who wrote 0. We had one person who wrote part-time 4. They'll come up as a 0. And then anyone where that was missing, if they didn't have a value. If they don't have a value of 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, they'd come up as 0.
Okay.
So I called it NA in my last one, not applicable.
That makes sense, yeah.
I usually don't have a true 0. I usually, like I could have made them a 3 or something, but I figured for this it didn't matter. And then for 1, what is, and you're seeing we put it in that one quote because that tells it that it's text, it's string. So what do we want to call our group 1?
1 to 2 children.
And you can have spaces because you have it in a string.
Okay.
We have 2. What do we want to call 2?
3 or more.
And then you always put a period at the end because that's what you do in SPSS. So now we can run it. Nothing came up, so it went through, but we don't know if it really works. So the next thing that I would do is I would actually go back and I would run the original, how many kids are 0 to 18, and then I'd run my new one. Um, and I'll run them together because then that tells me, right, if my numbers are right. I was moving my screen so you guys could see it. Sorry. So we have 2 people who should be NA, right? We've got our 0 and our 1, and that counts. For our 1 to 2, 9 plus 3 is 12, so we caught them all. And then our 3, 4, and 5 is 16, 3, and 1, which is 20, so we caught them all. So you always run the check to make sure you didn't miss someone. So now we're ready to actually run things. What we actually want to run is we want to know the number of children. We want to run that by amount. We want to know that we say by amount willing to pay, but what's our real question here? What are we looking to answer with this?
If the number of children that they have affects the amount that they're willing to pay.
So what are stats that we could run? So we have our number of children as a grouping variable. We have 2 groups. Mm-hmm. What could we run to see? And our amount willing to pay, we actually have as a real value, where it's got a money piece. Oh, actually, though, here, we should run that first. So we should run amount willing to pay, so that you can kind of see what it looks like, because we have to do something to it first. So we created this variable, amount pay, and we've got dollars, right? You've got the people who are free, but then we've got this thing called sliding scale, other, and missing. And what I did, the sliding scale, the other, and the missing actually are values. And so if we go and look at, this is important because if we run this right now, it sees it as 77, 88, and 99. And so we've got all these values in, and it's going to see this as $77, $88, and $99. So we actually don't want them in the run, mm-hmm. right? So we're going to actually make them missing. So we'll put in 77, 88, and 99, so that if that comes up, we know that it's missing. And I probably, thinking about it, the fact that we go to 100, I probably should have done 777, 888, 999, because 77, 88, and 99 could be a value, but they aren't, but they could have been values, so that was my bad. But now, back to our question. So we have a variable where we can compare 2 groups, the 1 to 2 and the 3 and more, mm-hmm. and we have this amount that can be kind of anything. What can we run?
I feel like I don't remember this stuff at all.
Yeah, I guess I wish I kind of knew we were like actually running the things, and then I would have brushed up a little bit.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry about that.
It's all right. I just want to see where people are. So I think we can run a t-test.
That's what I was going to say, because that's like the one I can remember.
Yeah. Yeah. The big things that we'll probably run are t-tests and chi-squares, right? And so t-tests are when you have the interval ratio, so any kind of value, and chi-squares would be comparing groups. Okay. And so that's mostly what we have. But look at our questions. They're both on amount willing to pay, which we turned into this interval ratio. It was categorical, but we made it interval ratio. So we can run a mean, we can run a median, right? We can get those measures of central tendency. And so, and then this just happens to be 2 groups, and this happens to be 2 groups. So we can actually run the same thing. If it was 3 groups, we'd run an ANOVA.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So under analyze, it's going to be under compare means.
Sorry, so a t-test is comparing 2 groups.
Mm-hmm. You can only, for a t-test, you can only compare 2 groups. Mm-hmm. For an ANOVA is like a bunch of t-tests. So if we were to compare like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, every time we run a t-test, we're introducing error. And so if you had more groups, you would run an ANOVA because it would run them all at once. Mm-hmm. So it minimizes that error. That's that whole between and within. Mm-hmm. Stuff, if you remember that. Mm-hmm. So, but we are nice because it's really nice and simple. And these are independent samples because you're either in one group or the other. You're not in both. And so we want to know if the amount that they pay is different. and we're very interested. We're going to use your variable. So we have to define our groups. So do you remember the numbers that we gave the groups?
1 and 2.
Yeah. So you have to know that when you go into it. So then I'm going to paste it because that's what I do, so that later on when I ask myself what we did, I'll remember. And here's my other tip. You guys, you might use SPSS enough, but if you have multiple syntax files open, it will paste in the last one that's open. So try to just have one open at a time, because then otherwise you don't know where it is. And then you just highlight it and press the play button.
How did you get to that screen, the run SPSS? Was that just, how did you get to that?
I created one. So anytime you go in and you do, where is it? You hit paste, it will put it in an SPS. It will put it in a file. And I just happened to, I saved this one. So this has everything that I've done to this. So I know what I've run, and I can make little notes to myself if I want. But like when I'm like, wow, what was where born, I can go back and see. So, but you hit paste, it will create a syntax file. That's what it's called, the syntax. And that's a way to also learn syntax. Like with the compute, if I sometimes forget, I'll start it and then I'll paste it and then I'll go in and know how to finish this. But that one I just find easier to do on my own. I don't like this one. So then you run it. And these are the same ones. I ran it twice, but what do you guys like? Where's the first place you're going to look to see if there's a significant difference?
Aren't you supposed to look at equal variance as not assumed?
So yeah, you can do the equal or that one. These groups, we have a different. It's 10 versus 15. So yeah, so we can definitely look at that one. But you
The
first start with here, the significance. And 0.93. What does that tell you?
It's not significant.
There's no significant difference. And so what we'd actually report, what we're going to report back to people, was that there was no significant difference. And then I'll go back later and get it, but I'll bring over the t-value, I'll bring over the means for each group, I'll bring over the degrees of freedom, and the p-value. And I'm not going to put that in the report because they don't care, but I'm going to put it in the appendix because someone who's really into it might care. And I can actually, because I have this in syntax, I can go back later and rerun it and pull it over if I need to. But we know, right, it was equal 0.93. I think it was, we know, like, that's not even close. Like, so the amount that they're willing to pay did not depend on the children. So now we want to run it, but we're not interested in, it's no longer the number of children as a grouping variable. What was our other, free and reduced lunch. So before we run it, we should look at our groupings for free and reduced lunch. So I did all this earlier, so I have it written down. But so are you eligible for free and reduced lunch? So you have 4 groups, right? Or 3 groups. Yes, no, and don't know. Which one are we interested in? Are we interested in all 3?
Don't know.
Yeah, there's only 2, so don't know. So then, because this is giving me the variable labels, I would actually go and look at in here. And see, that's the hard part, is you've got this now. But so now I have to look at, are you eligible for free and reduced lunch? So my groups are going to be 1 and 2 again, because those are the ones that I'm really interested in. I lost my syntax because I moved it. But so I'm going to compare means. And then do you remember which one I want to choose?
Independent samples, t-tests.
Exactly. So I don't care about the number of children anymore. I think it's this, yeah, so it's this one. And my groups are still 1 and 2, so I continue. And I'll paste, and hopefully that'll make, oh, I lost it. Let me see if I can get it to jump back up. There it is. I pasted it, so it's here, right? And I'll run it. And you're going to start. So here's the first place you look.
Not significant.
It's not significant. So the amount that they're willing to pay is not dependent on whether it's a free and reduced lunch. So again, I'll later pull that other stuff over. So is there something else that you guys want to look at that you think could impact the amount they're willing to pay, or?
Do you mind just going back to how many people were in the yes/no for the eligible for reduced lunch?
19 and 5. So we don't have a lot of no's.
Yeah. So does that impact this a lot?
Yeah. It should catch it. I mean, 5 is enough, but it's barely enough. And so, yeah, we would say that it doesn't seem to be, so it's not and when you look at the amount, right, it's 54, the no's were willing to pay $54 versus the 43. Now, the other thing that you could do is we could be very interested in who said free, and were they free and reduced lunch? And for that, I would do a crosstabs. So we could look at the amount pay. I would look at that as rows because it's going to be a lot. And then
you're in it right now.
Oh, good. That worked out. And if we really wanted, we could do we really couldn't do a chi-square because there's too many variables. But so for those that said that they were willing to pay 0, 3 of them were in a free and reduced lunch program, and 1 was not. So and then everyone else was willing to pay. So that's why we're not seeing anything.
Okay.
So those are the 2 things that we had. I mean, Ariel's going to have to run stuff, and she and I are meeting on Monday. The other thing that people want is they want to know kind of their views on equipment and their views on fees, but that's be qualitative. So what I'll do is I'll actually run an ID list for how many, let's see, the number of children. So I'll look at how many multiple children. And so Yvonne's going to have to go through and look at, for the less people versus the more, if there's a difference in what they're saying, for the free and reduced lunch people, which we don't have very many of, versus the other, if there's a difference in what they're saying. So she'll actually look at, qualitatively, she'll compare the groups for the stories. So we do have other things though, right? So I don't know if there's other things people want to run, but we asked about who should pay for shin guards and stuff. So we can look at whether there's a difference in opinion for things, but right now we don't have a question on it. So.
And the way that Yvonne is able to look at the number of children versus certain things is because the families had submitted the survey at the beginning where we asked them how many kids they had.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So what's going to happen is in the Excel document, I'll have a master, but then she's going to have her own, and Ariel's going to have her own, and maybe we'll all end up using Ariel's, I don't know, but the Spanish speakers will be highlighted in one color, and we'll look at them versus the English speakers. And then for Yvonne, since she only has 2 questions, we'll just pull out those questions and give her own pages, and she can compare and contrast the number of kids. Like, she has a lot of different ways that she might look at it. She needs to kind of pick one, and we'll kind of see where it's at. So,
okay.
So yeah. Do you guys have any? I mean, I don't have much else. Do you have any questions?
Not really. That was really helpful for me because I actually took SAS when I did my lab. So I've never seen anything run in SPSS before.
SAS is semicolons versus periods. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. I've done a little bit of SAS, but I don't know it as well. So I much prefer SPSS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking at it, I prefer it as well.
And I'm gonna send Yvonne the file because she has SPSS, so she can play with it. But I think Ariel doesn't, so we'll do it together. So,
Okay.
but Jillian, if you want to play with it, you can play with it.
I don't have it on my computer either.
So if there's something else, like if you guys go and you look at the survey and you think I'd really like to know this, then let's do another session where we run it. But I'd like you guys to be thinking about like what those variables are, and we'll pull it out. So, and we'll run a frequency on everything so that then we can report. So we'll tell them the average that people were willing to pay. We'll tell them, you know, people thought the soccer program should pay for this versus like we'll do that, but that's just descriptive.
Right.
So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I think I have to look at the survey questions again.
Yeah, I don't remember what was on there.
Yeah, that was a while ago.
Yeah, I mean, do you want me to pull it up, or do you want to do it on your own and have another meeting?
I mean, I guess if you have it, if you could pull it up.
Sure. My dog is very needy right now, just so you know. Let's see. Sorry, I gotta remember where I'm at. So, we can do male versus female, which I don't think is going to be a big deal. We can see that. We've got racial identity. Again, that we can just kind of describe that. We have language, which we did turn into a language, and we have, those will be Ariel's runs. I do have bilingual, and that ends up being 3 groups. It's either English, Spanish, English only, Spanish only. We have other groups, but those are the ones that she's probably going to run. We have how long you've lived in the U.S. versus not, and so we have U.S. born versus not. And we haven't decided if we're going to do anything with a number right now. We're just running it as U.S. born versus not, which she may look at as well. We just ran the how many children under 18. We ran the are they eligible. This we turned into the actual amounts, so we can look at that. So again, I'll run mean and median and mode for this. And do you remember the difference between those?
Yeah.
Okay.
We got that part down.
Yeah.
Got that.
No, it was underground. You're all over.
I remember that from like elementary school.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually my kids have done that too.
Yeah.
But it's really funny to me how people don't, like when I work with other people, how they don't understand. Other than mean, they're like, why would you use the mode? For this, it's just, you know, what they think the family should provide versus not. So, I mean, we could look at free and reduced lunch and see if there's a difference in what they think. Right? If they're different than the people who aren't. But again, you only have 5 who aren't. Mm-hmm. So it kind of comes down to what do you say with it?
Yeah.
We could look at U.S. born versus, there's a lot of ways that you could look at to see if there's a difference. But when we look at this, the data is categorical, right? Mm-hmm. You're not running a t-test on this. So this would be your chi-square.
Okay.
So you could run English born versus not, which is groups with the family provides versus soccer provides.
So categorical is chi-square.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, and do you remember what a chi-square really does?
No.
So the idea of a chi-square is it's a crosstabs. So it's built off of crosstabs, but the idea is what it's asking is there more or less in this group than I would expect? And so when you really compute a chi-square by hand, you literally, your formula is like observed minus expected, over expected. Yeah. And so the idea is we would expect an equal distribution. And so if there's not an equal distribution, then you're looking to see is something more or less. So that's what it tells you. And so you'll get a value. And if it's significant, then you have to go in and look at the cells to kind of get a sense as to where that's higher or lower than expected. So,
I feel like that explanation was better than any explanation I got in biostats.
Oh, good.
So thanks.
So then we just have this. So this is really the only other thing that we could run.
Sorry, do you mind just like talking through an example of like a chi-square? So for example, like if we were looking at this, the soccer socks and all that,
Let's
would
just run one.
okay, just in terms of like the wording for it, like you would expect there to be no difference.
So the chi-square assumption is that it will be equally distributed. So we can run the, let's see, let's run where born. And we'll do those as columns. And then we'll run where born by soccer shoes because that came up. Actually, we could run it for multiple here. We'll just run it for all.
Okay.
It'll run them all separate. So we're gonna get a bunch of separate chi-squares is what's gonna happen. And then you have to actually go into statistics and you would choose chi-square.
Right.
And you can run, there are correlations that you can run with categorical data. Spearman-Rowe is the classic one, so you could see if there's a relationship, but chi-square is typically what you run for this. And so then after you hit continue, and then in my world you hit paste. And so, sorry, my phone was buzzing, but it's no one that I know. So then we'll actually run this. And so this right here is your table, right? So the run born, we actually ran it by country. That's probably not, there's probably another one that I have, which is born in US versus, or maybe I never created the born in the US versus not. So this is going to be pretty spread out, so it'll be hard to tell. But like everything, you start here, and there's no significant difference. But what it would say is that you would expect this 25 to be 5, 5, 5, 5. Well, how many is there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, so you'd expect 5 in each one here, or 7. So you'd expect that these would be equally spread out. But the problem here is that we have so many countries that and we have so few people. Like for the one, you're not going to get a district.
So it could be significant when we make it U.S. versus non-U.S.
Yeah, I just have to remember what that's called. Maybe I didn't make that, but I thought I made a U.S. born versus not. Maybe I don't have one. Would you like to compute a variable, U.S. born versus not? Here, let's choose. Bilingual's going to have more than one too. Or well, so you can have more than 2. Let's see. Let's just try with bilingual. See. So we're now in Arial territory.
Okay.
So that has 5 groups. Yeah, so we just have too many. Let's see. All right, so I can do a select if and just do her variables of interest. Oh, wait, no, I probably can't for hers. Sorry, I'm trying to think of a good one to do for you guys. Okay, let's do free and reduced lunch because we know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to have 3 groups. Oh, well, actually, here, let's do number of children. Because you created that one. We know that doesn't have a ton, right? Or does it? Oh. So this, you're seeing a significant difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happening is that when you have the soccer program, you're not seeing as many people thinking that they should provide it as the family providing it. And for here, all 11 are in this, right, where you expect this to be kind of divided out. This is a little closer to divided out.
Yeah.
So this is probably your one that's really So this is lower than expected. And so you could say, right, when you've got fewer children, and again, this is not with the family providing, although you've got 100% here, and you've got like 60%, probably more than that, 70% here. But this is your difference. When you have 1 to 2 children, you're more likely. So when you have 1 to 2 children, you're significantly more likely to say the family should provide. Is how you would kind of describe that. So that's one. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So this one we don't have enough, but here for 11, you really do expect that there would be, like here, right? They're not equal, but they're relatively close. This is not even close, and so that's, you know, that the interaction is happening in here.
Okay, yeah, that was helpful.
Yeah.
So glad we found something.
Yeah.
And that's actually probably not a bad thing to think about, is whether the number of children influences what you think should be paid for or not. And so that was for shoes. For socks, you're not seeing a difference. So you see a difference for shoes. You don't see a difference for socks. You're not seeing a difference for shin guards. And you're not seeing a difference for soccer balls. And you're not seeing a difference for jerseys. So it really, like, the one thing it comes down to is shoes. And so we could, if I was Yvonne, I might go and look to see if that came up in the conversation more, the shoes, or not.
Okay.
But that's the only one. So, and right, it's the same number of groupings. So here, just even having one person in here changes it. So
yeah, it's interesting that it shows how, like, each person weight, like, their weight is so much with these.
Right, and partially because your N is small, right? You've got 11, but yeah. So yeah.
Cool.
All right. Do you have any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, if you think of other things that you want to run, let me know. And right now we don't have another session scheduled. I'm just going to meet with Ariel independently. And I guess I could try to video that if people want. But if you have other things, and as we write, when we start to tell our stories, we might want to come back to the quantitative data and say, hey, did we see a pattern here that might explain this? But we don't have a ton, as you saw, right? What we have to work with is, this is an outcome of interest, is who should pay for what, or sorry, who should provide, not even pay for, who should provide what, and then the amount of money. And everything else is really descriptive.
Yeah.
And even if we ran chi-squares and stuff, we're just describing the group more. So really, as we look at that equipment question, that payment question in the qualitative, we might come back here to run something different.
Okay.
So, all right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, have a good weekend. And then Jillian, do you want to email me times that you can meet?
Oh, yeah, I'll email you.
The recording so people